Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. On a damp Tuesday evening in mid-October, the quaint town of Maplewood lay shrouded in a specter of fog. The sleepy streets, lined with elm trees, shed of their vibrant fall foliage. Twisted through the heart of the community, as if reluctant to reveal the secrets they held. The once vibrant hues of autumn seemed muted under the heavy blanket of cloud cover. It was the kind of evening that made the air feel thick with anticipation, an unsettling stillness draping over the town. For the residents, life went on with an echo of normalcy. Neighbors exchanged polite nods, shopkeepers flipped over their open signs to closed, and kids reluctantly returned home from school, their laughter fading into the background of a chilling evening. Yet beneath this facade of everyday life lingered a darkness unbeknownst to all but one. A light flickered inconspicuously in a corner of Maplewood, casting long shadows that danced eerily along the walls of the old library, where Claire Whitmore, the town's librarian, was wrapping up for the day. Claire was meticulous in her work. The rows of books around her were not just the archive of knowledge, but the embodiment of the town she loved. Tonight, however, the usual comfort of her literary sanctuary felt stifling. An aura of unease set over her as she locked the heavy mahogany doors behind her. Somewhere in the periphery of her mind, an inkling of apprehension took root. Something felt wrong in Maplewood. Something that would soon reveal the town's darkness hidden beneath its tidy surface. The victim. The next morning unfolded with an unsettling calm, the light filtering through the fog, fighting to cast shadows away. As the town stirred from its slumber, the shout of a morning crow echoed across the stillness, setting the tone for a day that would change Maplewood forever. The sun, feeble and hesitant, struggled against the diffuse light, giving more of a promise than a reality. At the edge of town, just beyond the small park where children flew kites, lay a stretch of dense woodland. It was here, among the curled roots of ancient oaks and whispering pines, that the perfume of decomposition clung to the cool air. Tuesday's tranquility shattered when a couple out for an early morning walk stumbled across something chilling. A small, lifeless form, barely visible among the tangled underbrush. Local authorities arrived rapidly, their blue and red lights cutting through the morning quiet like a dagger. Detective Mark Reynolds, a rugged figure well acquainted with the shadows, stepped forward to take in the scene. The victim was identified as 23-year-old Liza Monroe, a spirited young woman known for her community engagement and infectious laughter. She was the local artist, often found sketching beneath the park's grand trees. But now, her dreams lay extinguished, her once bright future reduced to a gruesome reality of tragedy. As they cordoned off the area, the reality of Maplewood's innocence began to crack. Who would want to harm a gentle soul like Liza? The deeper they delved, the more they began to realize that this was not a random act of violence, but perhaps something deeply rooted in the town's fabric. The whispers of secrets buried far longer than Liza herself beckoned ominously in the winds that rustled through the leaves. Crime scene. The air around the wooded area thickened with the dull murmur of officials as they worked. Detective Mark Reynolds surveyed the crime scene with a meticulous eye, his experienced gaze analyzing every detail. The sun had fought its way through the stubborn clouds, spilling soft light onto the evidence strewn across the forest floor. A faint chill clung to the air, imbuing the scene with a sense of finality. Liza's body lay carefully covered by a white sheet, a stark contrast to the browns and greens of the forest. Though her features were obscured, her personal effects scattered nearby painted a haunting picture. A sketchbook filled with vibrant drawings, a locket gifted from her grandmother hanging from a nearby branch, and a coffee cup from the town's cafe, still half full, with lukewarm contents. Evidence markers were placed methodically by forensic team members, each symbol a solemn reminder of a life cut short. The eeriness of the scene deepened with every passing moment. Nearby, a partially crushed wildflower referred dismally to the violence that had transpired. Reynolds turned his attention to the scattered footprints trailing away from the site, leading deeper into the woods. The prints were incomplete, suggesting a struggling rift in the natural order that had punctured the town's day-to-day facade. As he knelt beside the markings, he felt the weight of Liza's absence pressing down on him. Questions began to spiral in Reynolds' mind. Was this an act of passion or revenge? Was someone she knew harboring resentment? The tightening knot in his stomach hinted that this case would unveil more than just the story of Liza Monroe, would unravel a web of secrets obscured by the peaceful demeanor of Maplewood. The early investigation. As the first day of the investigation unfolded, the atmosphere in the Maplewood Police Department crackled with urgency. Detective Reynolds convened his team in the conference room, a modest space adorned with pinned maps and case file photographs. The muted hum of fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow, underpinning the gravity etched on each officer's face. With Liza's murder at the forefront, whispers circulated amongst the townsfolk, combining fear with fervent speculation. "All right, listen up," Reynolds began, holding a photo of Liza on a flip chart. "This isn't just about finding who did this to Liza, it's about protecting the entire community. We need to act fast." Each officer took turns suggesting avenues of inquiry. Reynolds focused on Liza's social connections, piecing together her relationships within the town. The cafe where she had worked part-time became the first lead. Her colleagues described her as open and friendly, although some noted an unsettling interaction she had with a customer named Eric, a young man with a troubled past recently returned to Maplewood. Allegedly, he'd become fixated on her sketches, displaying a mix of admiration and possessiveness that raised eyebrows among regular patrons. Later that afternoon, they turned their attention to Liza's art collective, a gathering of budding artists sharing ideas and inspiration. They hoped to uncover any conflicts or rivalries that could hint toward motive. As they interviewed her friends, the atmosphere thickened. Whispers of jealousy and resentment surfaced, revealing a world of unspoken competition hidden beneath the camaraderie. Back in the precinct, the sound of ringing phones and hurried footsteps underscored the unfolding crisis. Each detail, no matter how small, could potentially unlock the door to Liza's last moments. Reynolds couldn't ignore the growing feeling that the echoes of jealousy and unresolved resentment might be the key to unraveling this tragic tale, a spotlight on the duality of small-town charm and the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. The dead ends. Days turned into a week, and as autumn leaves continued their slow descent, the investigation appeared to stall. Reynolds paced the precinct, studying the ever-growing pile of notes on his desk, his brow furrowed with frustration. Each lead sought meant a path explored, yet time and again he found himself at blind alleys. The early excitement of leads turned into an exhausting cycle of interviews filled with vague recollections and deadpan alibis. The cafe staff, while offering glimpses into Liza's interactions, provided little else. Eric, the customer whose obsession raised brows, had vanished after questioning. The frantic attempts to locate him yielded nothing. Friends reported he had gone back to his old life in the city, leaving no forwarding address. Meanwhile, friends from the art collective were ironically evasive, their voices laced with an unease that only amplified Reynolds' suspicions. It felt as though new friendships were forged out of fear and loyalty rather than truths or support. His heart sank when he followed up on a promising tip about a heated exchange Liza had with a female painter named Sarah during a recent exhibit. The heated confrontation was vague. Sarah claimed the words were misconstrued, the fire of passion misinterpreted, but her insistence on the exchange made it difficult for Reynolds to ignore her potential role. Yet, when Reynolds sought her out, she presented an alibi that held weight, and witnesses corroborated her story. With each rejection of a suspect, the weight on his shoulders grew heavier. The frustration of inaction hung in the air, a lingering fog that seemed to creep into the precinct's very walls. As the walls of the investigation closed in, Reynolds knew he needed a breakthrough, one small fragment that could rewrite the narrative of confusion into clarity. With every path leading him in circles, hope flickered just out of reach, yet he felt an insistent whisper. The truth was there, concealed among the shadows, waiting to be unearthed. A break in the case. As the trees rustled with the whispers of approaching winter, a new lead broke through the stagnant fog of the investigation. A phone call late one evening sent a jolt through Reynolds' weary. Minda, local jogger, had discovered something in the woods near the crime scene. Reluctant yet intrigued, he gathered his team for an early morning foray into the depths of the forest. The sky was overcast, lending a somber air as they arrived at the designated area. The jogger, a middle-aged woman named Martha, recounted her discovery with trepidation, leading them further into the green. Moments later, they arrived at a small clearing. There, nestled among the underbrush, was a torn piece of canvas. Reynolds' heart quickened at the sight. It appeared to be part of Liza's artwork, unmistakably depicting a vibrant landscape she had painted for her last exhibit. Careful not to disturb the area, forensic specialists set to work. As they combed through the underbrush, Reynolds felt a sense of urgency tingle at his fingertips. Finally, tissue samples were taken, and a sense of anticipation gripped the team. The jogger had also mentioned hearing a strange, noisy, brief, but desperate cry in the woods days earlier, which now seemed disturbingly poignant against the scrappy backdrop of the case. Back at the precinct, the discovery of the canvas proved pivotal. It wasn't just evidence of where Liza had been. It was a key to connecting the dots. The art community swirled with intricate relationships. Adversities and rivalries undercut each seemingly wholesome interaction. The following day, a uniformed officer rang with news that a witness had come forward, claiming to have seen Sarah suspiciously lurking near the edge of the woods on the night of Liza's death. The pieces began to shift again. Was there perhaps more to Sarah's anger than she had admitted? The harbingers of doubt resurfaced, and the case that had stalled now spun with renewed vigor. With determination igniting his resolve, Reynolds' instincts surged. Liza's truth was closer than ever. The suspect, the following week, unraveled with a heightened intensity, adrenaline pulsing through the precinct, as Reynolds and his team charted a course towards Sarah. With each passing day, the threads of suspicion wound tighter around her as the evidence amassed. The pale light of the day felt heavy, but it pushed the detectives forward, invigorated by the new focus that had emerged in the investigation. Reynolds arranged to meet Sarah for a formal interview, her once radiant spirit now cloaked in apprehension. He insisted on meeting her at the town hall, away from the atmosphere of the gallery or cafe that had once flourished with creativity. The room with stark walls adorned only with muted tones and a slight disarray from stacks of paperwork bore witness to the stress enveloping everyone involved. As she entered, a nervous energy clung to her, her fingers fidgeting with the sleeves of her sweater. "I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Reynolds pressed her gently, seeking clarity, the tension mounting with every word. He carefully navigated the conversation around the altercation the two women had shared, delicately drawing out details. "Did you feel threatened by Liza's success?" he probed, noting how her breath hitched at the question. The art community, he gathered, had often been a minefield, a battleground of aspiration riddled with jealousy. As she spoke of her past grievances, her tone shifted, revealing an undercurrent of bitterness. "I wanted recognition too. I was just tired of being overshadowed," she admitted, her eyes flashing with the elusive spark of someone overwhelmed by envy. Slowly, Reynolds felt the pieces locking into place. Sarah's artistic ambition had morphed into deep-rooted resentment, motive, begging to be explored thoroughly. With the details of Sarah's behavior beginning to surface like ink spreading in water, they brought up the jogger's sighting. "You were seen near the woods the night Liza died," he stated, watching as the color drained from her face. The shift in her demeanor affirmed his resolve. The murky depths of Liza's demise felt tantalizingly close to clarity. The trial. Months later, the town of Maplewood, once cloaked in the tragedy of Liza Monroe's death, found itself thrust once more into the limelight. This time under the scrutiny of the courtroom's fluorescent lights. The air was thick with anticipation on the first day of the trial, the anxious chatter of townsfolk filling the packed gallery. Reynolds stood near the back, a silent observer reflecting on the tumultuous months that had preceded this moment. Sarah had been formally charged with second-degree murder, her face now a canvas of anxious worry instead of the artistic vibrancy that once defined her existence. The prosecution laid out its case against her methodically, weaving the strands of evidence into a narrative that painted Sarah's envy as a darkness that overshadowed her talent, the torn canvas, the witnesses, the alibi that unraveled under scrutiny. Like a frayed thread, as the trial progressed, testimonies poured in like tides. Friends voiced their opinions about Sarah's demeanor around Liza, recalling stories distorted by competition and jealousy. Each word felt both weighty and affirming, an echo of the unresolved anger carried throughout the art community. Reynolds watched on, noting the subtle shifts in Sarah's posture with each detail that came to light. However, the defense sought to anchor her innocence, arguing a lack of direct evidence tying her to the crime. The courtroom was taut as a rubber band, flipping between anger and sympathy. They painted Sarah as merely a passionate artist, her emotions exaggerated but devoid of intent to harm a canvas, marred by betrayal of ambition rather than malice. In closing arguments, the defense argued, art lies in expression. But what happens when the brush finds a darkened path? The question hung in the air, unsettling the gathered crowd. Yet Reynolds felt an assurance swell within him. The details had converged too closely for an innocent to escape scrutiny. As the jury deliberated, silence poured over the courtroom. the weight of the decision pressing heavily. The verdict, when finally delivered, pierced through the stagnant air, delivering a sentence as profound as Liza's untimely death. As Reynolds stepped outside into the crisp, cool evening, he took a deep breath, knowing that while justice had been served, the scars left on Maplewood would linger far longer than the trial itself, echoing in the hollow spaces where Liza's laughter once filled the air. The aftermath. The trial's conclusion wound its way through Maplewood like the chilled wind that ushered in the early winter, stirring echoes of relief and sorrow in equal measure. In the weeks that followed, the town grappled with a profound silence that settled heavy upon its shoulders. While Sarah's conviction provided some measure of justice for Liza, the pervasive grief threaded through the community underscored a haunting realization justice often comes at an unquantifiable cost. Reynolds often found himself wandering the now familiar streets, observing the habitual lives of the townsfolk as they attempted to reclaim a sense of normalcy. The cafe where Liza had once worked sat eerily quiet, her empty stool at the counter a visceral reminder of the vibrant spirit now lost. The usual hum of conversation felt stilted, as if even the walls mourned with those who entered. In time, memorials sprung up around town. A mural painted by local artists encapsulated her memory, color bursting forth against the drabness of winter. Yet for those closest to Liza, the grief was suffocating. Friends who had rallied during the trial now struggled to articulate their emotions, and Reynolds recognized their burden, the loss resonating deeply in their shared glances and somber conversation. Meanwhile, the local art community thrived, driven perhaps by an overwhelming need to drown out the sorrow that had infiltrated their world. Reynolds attended an exhibit showcasing Liza's work, where friends honored her through creativity, though each brushstroke seemed drenched in an unspoken understanding of fragility. As he stepped through the gallery, he paused before a significant piece, a portrait of a forest, the trees vivid yet tinged with shadow, an expression of life eternally intertwined with loss. Here, amidst the colors and canvases, Reynolds felt a flicker of hope that perhaps creation could serve as a balm for grief. The arts had endured rather than diminished, channeling pain into beauty, a testament to resilience against the landscape of heartache. Yet as he walked the hall, he could not shake a lingering weight upon his heart. The town's vibrant spirit echoed with unvoiced questions. Could healing ever truly take place? And could the bonds of community withstand the shadows that had threatened to unravel them? Standing in front of Liza's portrait, he realized that perhaps the true aftermath of this ordeal would reveal itself not only in the conviction of a suspect, but in how Maplewood chose to uplift the memory of a life stolen too soon. Reflection. In the aftermath, long after the echoes of the trial had faded into hushed conversation, Mark Reynolds found himself gravitating towards the woods where it all began. Autumn had surrendered to the bitter chill of winter. Once colorful leaves, now a memory, lost beneath a blanket of frost. It was here amidst the towering trees that he often came to reflect, seeking solace in the solitude. The event had carved a permanent imprint on Maplewood's soul, a reminder of the vulnerability that lies within tightly knit communities. Each rustle of the wind whispered tales of loss, of dreams interrupted, and of friendships forever altered. Reynolds understood that darkness coexists with light, Beneath the artistry and laughter, shadows sometimes stalked, waiting patiently for their moment to engulf. As he walked the winding paths, he pondered the scars that would remain on the town. Would the community emerge stronger from the ashes of tragedy? Or would Liza's loss cast a long shadow over their lives? He couldn't help but wonder if the comfort of routine would eclipse the lessons learned, or if they would find a way to honor her legacy through newfound empathy and connection. Yet one thing remained clear. Grief could forge deeper ties, urging the town to come together in the face of adversity, creating a shared narrative that celebrated not only the fragility of life, but the courage found within. Liza may have been lost, but her spirit intertwined with the very essence of Maplewood, urging as many to embrace their passions and, ultimately, one another.